Hey guys, what do you say we do a little barrel burning? Barrel burnout. It's a tough subject. It's a big subject. It raises a lot of questions. And part of the reason it's getting raised now is Sig Sauer's new 277 Fury cartridge that has 80,000 PSIs of maximum average chamber pressure. A lot of guys are saying, man, that's going to burn out barrels in a hurry. But wait a minute. I thought flame temperature burned out barrels. What exactly is going on? Well, we're going to try to find out on this episode of Ron Spomer Outdoors. I'll admit I don't know everything about barrel burnout, but I've picked a few things up over the years. Maybe some of it's not true. You know, the old wives' tales about burning out barrels. Now, one thing that a lot of us hunters thought was that it was the friction of the bullet going down the barrel that wore it out. If you shot too many times, eventually that friction is going to wear out the barrel. That's really not what happens. That's why you can shoot, say, a .22 long rifle for thousands upon thousands upon thousands of times and you don't erode the barrel through friction. So, I got a letter from one of my fans. Had some interesting points to make. I'd like to read it to you and then we're going to discuss things. Hi Ron, I love watching your channel. You have so much useful information on rifles, cartridges, game, plus a history of what makes each one popular. Gosh, I like this guy already. One thing that I have ever heard from you that was completely wrong is what wears out a barrel. It's pressure. Here we're getting back to that 80,000 PSI thing. It's the heat from the powder that does almost nothing because it ignites and it burns up so quickly. All right, let's stop for a second. Here is, that's gotta be what, 450? Didn't burn my finger. Quickly, you pass through it. I think that's what he's driving at. The flame burns and gets out of the barrel so quickly, that can't be causing the problem. We'll get back to that. When the bullet first leaves the case, it's moving very slowly, like a dragster. At that time, the pressure is highest. But as the bullet picks up speed, at that point, the pressure is rising at about the same speed as the bullet is increasing its speed. So now the powder explosion is trying to keep up with the bullet. When the powder charge is unable to push the bullet any faster, that's its top velocity. And if your barrel's long enough to reach this goal, that's great. That would be the optimum length to cut your barrel. I've been studying barrel burnouts for quite some time, and as you can probably much figure out which cartridges would burn out a barrel faster. Example, take two 30-06 cartridges, or the rifles. It's the same rifles, brand new, use the same powder charge in both, but shoot a 120 grain bullet in one, a 220 grain bullet in the other one. I can almost guarantee, with everything else being equal, the one shooting the 220 grain bullet will burn out faster because it would take significantly more pressure to get that bullet spun up to speed. That's why a .22 long rifle lasts so long. There isn't enough pressure in the cartridge to expand the bore during firing. And there he's getting something that I agree with. Expand the bore. We're going to get back to that. I hope you read all of this and it makes sense to you. Well, some of it does, sir. Some of it does. But then some of it doesn't. So you got me to thinking, is it pressure, not flame heat, that wears out the barrel? Now, it's well proven time and time again that your barrel wears out at the throat, at the start of the rifling. So right in front of your cartridge, sitting inside of the chamber, there's a little bit of a dead space that doesn't have any rifling in it. Free bore, or throat, or lead, L-E-A-D-E, lead. And then the bullet jumps across that after the powder obviously ignites and the gases expand and drive it forward, hits the rifling and it's on its way. That rifling right there where the flame temperature is the highest is what starts to erode. And if you take a bore scope like a Hawkeye and you look in that back of that barrel and see that, it cracks up like an old sidewalk. So what is making the cracking? The theory has long been heat. You heat the barrel, it cools. You heat it, it cools. What happens when you do that to something? It starts to break down. It cracks from all that expansion and contraction. This gentleman is suggesting it's the pressure that does it. So it got me to scratching my head. What's pressure versus heat? If you increase the heat of something, you increase its pressure. Anybody who's checked his tire pressure when he's been driving down a highway notices that. Wow, that pressure's really up. It wasn't that high when I checked it this morning before I started driving. Heat expands it. So pressure and heat seem to be inextricably linked, like they're both products or manifestations of the same thing. Now, you physicists out there might have some better answers on that one, but that's where my old brain is going. So as I'm thinking about this gentleman's contention, I got to thinking about pressures in cartridges. Obviously, different cartridges are allowed different maximum average chamber pressure. So I've brought some out here for examples. Now, we're going to consider these 22s, and I'm going to ask you, what do you think is going to wear out your barrel faster? The 5.56 NATO, the 22-250 Remington, the 220 Swift, or the 223 Winchester Super Short Magnum? I think most of us would say either the Swift or the 223. And now, what do these things have in common? Well, they're all 22s, and they're all driving their bullets fairly fast, but some of them have more powder than the others. So there's the potential for more flame temperature, but they also have different pressures. So if we say the 220 Swift is probably the most famous barrel burner of the lot, but the 223 Winchester Super Short Magnum is probably going to burn out even faster than that. Let's look at their maximum average chamber pressures. Hey everyone, Ron Spomer here, inviting you to check out rsotv.com. Ad-free, censorship-free, lots of deep dives into rifles and how they work and how you can tweak them and improve them, hand-loading videos, hunting videos. Get it all at RSOTV. Click the links below and check us out. The 5.56 NATO, 62,366 PSI of pressure. 22-250, 65,000. 220 Swift, 62,000. Uh-oh, starting to test this theory about pressure. The WSSM, 65,000 PSI. So what other differences are there in these cartridges? The average volume for powder. So you look on the average water, that's H2O, that's your water-filled recess in grains. So your powder volume or your water volume is 31 grains with the 5.56 NATO, 49.9 with the 22-250, 52.5 with the 220 Swift, 56.3 with the 223 WSSM. So what we're seeing is more powder. That suggests to me more flame. The pressures are not following that. And we're seeing probably your fastest burnout with the 223, the next one with the 22-250, even though it has lower pressure. So that argues against the pressure argument to a degree. We can carry that into the 270s. Got a 270 Winchester, got a 270 Winchester mag. Which one do you think is going to burn out your barrel faster? I think most of us would say it's the Weatherby Magnum, right? 65,000 PSI for the 270 Winchester, 62,500 for the Weatherby Magnum. So it's not pressure. Same thing with these 7mm. We got the SAUM here and the RUM here. Both are 7mm. Both of them have 65,000 PSIs of pressure. Which one do you think is going to burn out your barrel faster? The one with more powder. So that kind of argues against the pressure thing. What does this mean for our 80,000 PSI in that 277 Fury? I'm not really sure. I'm as much asking this question as providing answers this time. But this is how my brain was going, trying to balance this temperature stuff. Now, as most of us have heard time and time again, it's that flame temperature that starts all the cracking. Did a little research on that, and there are three things that keep coming up for barrel burnout. The heat, the chemical breakdown, which seems kind of weird, but you start studying chemistry and it turns out it's a big deal. And then mechanical. And the mechanical is not so much the bullet, because remember, this is just where the rifling is starting. So it's literally ramping up to the bore size. And that's where it starts to break down. And you've got gas cutting going on, sort of flame temperature is the same thing, but really it's that high pressure, high velocity gas shooting through there that's eroding. And then also powder, because when you ignite a cartridge, the flame is back here. It starts to expand as that powder turns to a gas, while the powders in the front aren't quite ignited yet. So you're literally compressing the powder against the base of the bullet to push it down the bore as this powder progressively burns. Different things are going on there. So that powder can actually be sandblasting the rifling. And that's where some of the mechanical erosion starts or exacerbates things. Now the chemical, it's really complicated because there's so many chemicals in gunpowder. You've got single base powders and double base powders. And Some of them have additives to slow down the burn rate. Some of them have additives that actually have been proven to harden the barrel a bit. I think it's titanium dioxide that will harden the steel. It sort of nitrides it, they say, and that makes it actually last longer. So you can contribute to longer barrel life with the right mixture of powder and or additives to the powder. So there are some differences there. And then heat and flame, I think I'm sticking with that as the major contributor, because as everyone knows, the faster you shoot your barrel, the hotter it gets, the faster it wears out. This is why the infamous prairie dog shooters and their 220 Swifts and 22 250s could burn out a barrel literally in an afternoon, because they might shoot 10 rounds a minute and go on like that all day. And that barrel stays so hot, and every time that flame goes down and that metal is expanding and contracting and expanding and contracting, the cracks begin to develop, the chemicals get into the cracks and start eating away at the metal, and the powder scouring gets into the metal, and it all starts to break down. Now, pressure, I would say pressure has something to do with it too, because you think about pressure, what is it doing? It's work hardening the metal. You know, we think of bending a wire, it gets hot, it gets weak, and it breaks. Well, a barrel, of course, is uniform, and it's going to expand minimally. We're not going to see it, but it'll expand a little bit and shrink. But there's no openings really to do that expanding and shrinking until it starts to crack from the heat and the chemical. Now you've got little cracks in your steel barrel sidewalk, and suddenly you get an effect from the pressure opening those cracks perhaps. So there's got to be a little pressure stress fracturing going on inside of a barrel as well. So I don't think this gentleman is out to lunch on his assessment. He's onto a part of the issue. I think I'm onto some of it. You guys might know even more. We would sure love to hear about it. Do you think, or do you have any evidence that says 80,000 PSI is necessarily going to burn your barrels out a lot faster if you keep your powder volume down and your flame temperature down? And remember, there are certain powders that will burn and raise the pressure sufficiently to get your velocity with cooler burning powder. It just doesn't raise the temperature quite as much. So I'm sure these manufacturers are messing around with all of this stuff. And I have read that SIG, in developing their 277, has developed some new powders and blends, I think, of powders that are cool burning to minimize the issue. So a lot of things we're going to learn about pressures here with this new 80,000 PSI coming along. And by the way, I have heard of some other brands, some other companies out there who are messing around with even higher pressures than that. They're getting up towards 130,000 PSIs. Whew. So I don't know what's going to happen down the road, gentlemen and ladies, but we are going to find out, and it's going to be a wild ride. So I hope you guys can take the pressure. This is Ron Spomer, Hunt Honest and Shoot Straight.